Hi my dear friends, my name is Hussein Meshayekhi and I'm back with another session from our Unreal Engine course. We have officially entered the lighting sessions. In this one, we're going to start learning about how to light our scenes. This is one of the most important things that we can do for our projects, and that is why I have dedicated a few sessions to lighting, because it's so important to get right. And I hope that you've been practicing what we have learned so far, and make sure to practice what we are going to learn. And the scenes and the projects may be different, but with experience we'll learn what methods to use for what type of projects. For example, right now in this scene we have these big windows and we have some curtains too, and the curtains are kind of like half open, and sometimes like maybe in another project you would have like curtains that are kind of like closed and you have less light coming through. And don't worry about that, like we're going to learn what to do in these kind of situations. And with that out of the way, let's start. So let me tell you that all the lights that we had put for this building in the previous session have been deleted, so we have no lights in our scene, and all we have is this player start here that you can see, this one. And since we have no lights, I've put this into the unlit mode so that we can see the building. And if I put it on the lit mode, because we don't have any lights, we can't see anything. The first light that we're going to explore is the directional light, or the sun. It resembles the sun, and I'm going to drag one here into our scene. Alright, now that we have a source of light, we can put the view mode on lit. And before we start talking about directional light, let me tell you, we have a post process already put into our scene, and I've put the exposure on the number of 10, on the value of 10. And let's go back. So I have this directional light. I need to change the angle so that the light gets inside. And right now, the only places that are not dark are the places that have been directly affected by the directional light. Okay, you don't have any other reflections. And we're not going to go through all of these options that we have on the right panel, but we're going to talk about the most important ones. Alright, the first option that we're going to talk about is the source angle, and it's regarding the edges of our shadows. Okay, with source angle we can blur the edges of our shadows, and try not to put a value more than 5 for this one, because it's gonna make your scene noisy. For example, if I put 20 or 50 or 40, you can see how noisy everything gets. So when you want to change this value, make sure to test out different values that fits your project, but as a rule of thumb, try not to have anything more than 5, for example. Okay, so let's see what else we have. We have source soft angle. So let me find the reflective material. For example, this vase. Okay, right now you can see the source of light, the directional light reflected on this vase, and with this number you can change how that looks, how that reflection looks. So it shows you a reflection of a source of light you might have in your projects. Now this option is not that frequently used. Let me just quickly increase the intensity of our light right now, because I want to be able to see things better. Okay, that's good. Right now I've put it on 150 and things look better now. We have another option called temperature, and it's regarding the warmth of the colors in our scene. Values less than 5000 give us a warm look, and values more than 5000 give us a kind of cold feel or look to our scene. So we can just change this based on the requirement of our project, and this effect world option turns it on or off. And cast shadows does the same with shadows, and you gotta leave it on. Now we also have indirect lighting intensity. Let me just put the temperature to what it was and explain what indirect lights are. So basically any light that hits a surface and gets reflected back into another direction is called an indirect light. Okay, so lights bounce off of those surfaces and get reflected in other directions, and they are essentially called indirect lights. And the more we increase this value from 1, the brighter our scene generally gets. So our scene gets less dark if we choose a higher number than 1 for our scenes. And I can even choose a very higher number, 10, 20, 50, and our scene becomes unnaturally very light and bright, and that's not good. So I put 5 here. And also let me tell you, whatever temperature that you use for your scenes will be applied to all types of lights and light bounces and indirect lights as well. So if you put the intensity on 20, 50 or whatever, or even 1, 2, any number that you put, temperature does not change how that looks and is affected to any number that you put for your intensity. So if you put a cold value for your temperature, it will give you a cold feel, and if you put a warm value for that temperature, it will give you a warm kind of feel to your scene. All right, let's move ahead. We already talked about intensity, so let me just change it back to 10 roughly. Okay. And this overall intensity value that we have does in fact affect our indirect lighting intensity. And if I put a very high number here, for example, you can see that we have exaggerated lights at those points, and also the whole scene has become a lot brighter. Okay, let me just change back my intensity to what it was, 10, let's say, maybe 20, maybe 50. Okay, that's better. We can also change the color of our lights with this option, light color. Okay, for example, red, and I can just have it revert back to white with this button. We have a lot of other options in advanced mode, and we're not going to cover all of them. We're going to talk about the most important ones. We already talked about bloom, okay, in the previous sessions. So if you want to have that, we gotta check it and change the value. However, we have already turned off bloom, and we don't have bloom in our scene. So what else we have? We have this directional light, and we have the gizmo for it. If I change the place of the gizmo anywhere in my building, it's not gonna affect the light. However, if I change the angle, you can see that it immediately affects my scene. So the angle of this directional light is more important than the placement. And so I put it somewhere here, doesn't really matter, but I changed the angle slightly. And let me just check the shadows for a second. I'm kind of happy with the shadows that we have right now. Okay, they look all right to me. So let's go on and talk about another topic. Okay, right now outside of our building is kind of pitch black, and we don't have anything that could light that part for us. We can have a skylight to solve that problem. So let me just go to lights and add a skylight to my scene. Okay, right now I put it here, but you can see that nothing happens in my scene. It hasn't worked yet, and I cannot see the results. So let me just go to the right panel. First, I gotta put the mobility on movable, and let me just explain real quick these options that we have here for mobility. We have a static, stationary, and movable. So static, we usually use a static when we want to bake our lights. So for certain scenes that we want to use baked lights and not lumen, we put the mobility on static. Okay, and right now because it's not directly related to our discussion, we're not going to talk about it. Stationary is when we want to have the lights be turned on or off on the final executable file, and we want to give it to our clients. We put that on a stationary. And movable gives us the ability, or the client the ability, to move the lights, and lights can be turned on or off, and also move and change location at the same time. So right now for our skylight, we gotta put it on movable. Okay, and also the thing about a skylight to remember is that it doesn't work on its own by default, even if we change the intensity. So for example, if I change the intensity from 1 to a very big number, nothing happens again. What we have to do is to just go to source type and choose a method. So source type basically determines how that light from our skylight affects our scene. So we have two methods. We have captured scene and cube map. So if we use cube map, we use an HDRI image, which is basically a very high quality image, which is 360 degrees as well, and that resembles the type of light that is reflected onto our scene with a skylight. Okay, so it gives us a very natural type of light. So right now, if I choose one of these images, that image is kind of used as a reference to determine how that light is affecting our scene. So for example, right now, if I put it on cube map and go and choose an image here, we can test it out. Let me just choose one of these images. For example, this one, this 4K image. Okay, and right now, again, we don't really see any changes, but if I increase the intensity this time, you can see that we can see the changes, and our scene, our scene's lighting is affected immediately. And you can see how beautiful and how great this light is. And we haven't done anything. We only have a skylight and a directional light, and with those two elements we get this type of lighting, which is great. Okay, so and I have to add that I have ray tracing on, and I'm going to give you a demonstration with ray tracing off. But just remember and just look at this scene. If you check the bookmark angles too, one skylight and one directional light could achieve lighting of this quality on their own, and this is great. So let me start tweaking my directional light a little bit right now. I'm going to change the temperature. For example, I'm gonna use a value like 3700, okay, so that we can have warmer lights, and it gives us a more natural feel into our scenes. Now remember, if you want to have good lighting generally in your scenes, you gotta play around with the shadows. So if you have nice shadows, realistic shadows, your whole lighting and your whole scene becomes elevated. So remember that. I gotta put this chair a little bit down, okay, on our floor, and with a few clicks and a few elements, we have this gorgeous lighting. I want to choose a different value for my temperature for this directional light, for example 4200, okay, and we can even test out other HDRI images right now and see how that affects our scene. For example, let me just choose another image, okay. See, our whole scene become a little bluish, and because we are changing different images, and each image has its own atmosphere, and that atmosphere determines what types of lights or how those lights by our skylight is affecting our scene. We get these different looks for our scenes, and just our scene looks beautiful right now. And you know, we've been using different images, and you can see that with just a few elements, with an HDRI image, a skylight, and a directional light, we can achieve something like this. And we can also have a background later on, and we're going to learn about that, so don't worry about that. And with whatever HDRI image that you use, you can always change the intensity scale and use one that is appropriate for that image. For example, right now I'm going to test out a few values, 10, 20, let's say 150, okay, and this is what we get. Alright, so the method that we just used was one of the best ones, but let's just use another one. So if I put the source type on capture scene, and if I check this real-time capture here, this option real-time capture, if I check it, I get an error message that tells me that I gotta have a sky atmosphere present to get good lights. And that is precisely what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go to this add button, and I'm going to go to visual effects, yes, visual effects, and sky atmosphere. I'm going to drag it here, put it there, and you can see that right now we have some kind of background and we have gorgeous lights again. So this method works well too, and we can just tweak the lights that we have here. If we change the angle of our directional light, we can get rid of the sunlight, and we get this cloudy feel, this kind of bluish look for our scene, which again looks good if you want to have cloudy setting. And if I choose the skylight and change the intensity for that, I can just tweak that light too. For instance, I put 320 for this, and let me just quickly change the exposure of my post-process volume. So I selected, go to the detail panel and change the exposure to 15, for example. Let's check the scene. And I'm pretty pleased with the lights that we have. Let me just go back to the skylight. Okay, select the skylight and change the intensity to 200. And this is the appropriate lights that I wanted to get. And this was another method to achieve a result of this quality. And we don't really have fixed values for different scenes. You gotta just play around with different numbers. For example, I put 120, 50, like any number, and I test out different intensity values so that I can get a type of result that I'm happy with. And generally, we don't have a magic number that fits all types of scenes. Okay.